Post-pandemic, research has indicated an increasing trend in the number of students at the college level requiring complex accommodations. One of those accommodations is flexible attendance. Now, this can be really confusing for first-time professors or professors who've not encountered this accommodation because, as we all know, active attendance and participation are essential to success in college courses. So what exactly does flexible attendance mean, and how can it be implemented given an instructor's legal obligation to meet accommodations as are outlined in the student's letter? In this presentation, we'll talk briefly about the policies and procedures related to flexible attendance so you can gain a greater understanding of how to implement this in your course for students who it applies to. So first and foremost, we want to talk a little bit about the purpose of this accommodation and what it's designed to do. So this accommodation applies to students who have chronic episodic illnesses that reoccur, and they will typically be briefly debilitating for the student. The intention of this accommodation is to allow for occasional absences throughout the semester due to medically uncontrollable events without the student receiving penalties for those absences, provided that in-person attendance isn't absolutely mandatory to satisfy the learning goals and objectives for the course for that day. This may apply differently to different courses, and it's not the same across all contexts. And that's why we'll talk in just a moment about the flex attendance plans. The students who this accommodation applies to will have this accommodation documented in their letter of accommodation that's sent via email both to the student and to the instructor. Typically, these students, to be eligible, will have a disability that manifests in unpredictable, occasional, but severe flare-ups. So a common example I like to give is a student who has a seizure disorder. Very briefly, that student may be out of commission. They may not be able to attend class as normal. And they often don't know that they're going to be experiencing a seizure, although there might be certain triggers like strobing lights or excessive heat. These students will be approved for this accommodation through the OAS intake process, and so they need to follow the same intake or initial registration process as any other student. If it's determined that a student needs this accommodation in order to have equal access to the curriculum and to educational opportunities commensurate with their peers, that accommodation will be documented in their letter that's sent again to the student and to the instructor. And this will require the creation of a flex plan. So as aforesaid, this is a complex accommodation and it does require a little bit of coordination to implement. And so the flex plan is created by OAS and the instructor. OAS will send the instructor a link to a digital form to fill out. Generally, we try to send that as early as possible. And typically, we're going to go ahead and once the instructor has completed that plan, we will convert it to a file and attach it along with the letter of accommodation so that all of those documents are there when that letter is sent. In cases where that is not possible, if a plan can't be completed in advance, the LOA will include a link to that digital form and the instructor will be directed to then fill out that digital form so it can be sent to the student and to the instructor. And that way, OAS, the student, the instructor, we all have the same understanding of where this accommodation applies and maybe what some of the limitations are within that specific course. In OAS, we like to tell students that they are their own best advocates, and so there are some responsibilities on the student's part to ensuring that this accommodation is implemented correctly. And so we encourage students very strongly to speak with each of their professors each semester to review the flex plan, clarify any expectations, and ask any questions that they might have. Some students may be most comfortable doing this via email versus an in-person conversation, but however that dialogue occurs, it should occur. We also ask that students notify instructors within 24 hours of a medical event related to disability that prevents them from class attendance. And we do say within 24 hours of the event. Obviously, ideally, the situation is that the student can let you know in advance of a missed deadline or advance of missed class. However, in some situations, as with the example of the seizure student from before, if the student has a seizure, they may not know that it's coming on, and they may be briefly debilitated after it does. And so they may need a few hours to send out those communications. We do ask that you be patient with that and you do demonstrate some compassion as it relates to those circumstances. Students should also understand that instructors should not request disability-specific medical documentation to substantiate the need if this accommodation is documented on their letter, and that OAS may follow up to request additional documentation if that is necessary. So if you have concerns as an instructor, you can reach out to OAS to clarify. As the instructor for the course, you also have some responsibilities in ensuring that this accommodation is met. And so you'll want to work with OAS to fill out the digital form that is sent to you via link to ensure that there is a flex plan in place for the student. You should defer to that flex plan in cases where the student is maybe missing work from class because of an excused disability-related absence, or they need an extension because of a excused disability-related absence. And of course, you are encouraged to exercise your professional discretion and compassion as it extends to those circumstances. As aforesaid at the beginning of this video, regular attendance and participation are essential for success in college courses. Students need to be there to learn the content, to participate in the activities, to succeed. And so I find that it's really important to clarify that flexible attendance accommodations do not excuse absences related to disability. They do not protect against excessive absences, especially when that number of absences is impacting the student's ability to participate in the course, meet the learning objectives, do the work that is required in the way that it is required. And this accommodation won't necessarily apply to clinical courses, experiential courses, or lab-based courses where students really need to be present as much as possible to participate in activities, to conduct labs with specialized equipment, to collaborate. And so if you do have questions about how this accommodation might apply to your course, or even concerns about whether it can successfully apply to your course, please reach out to OAS to have that conversation. We want you to be as honest as possible and as communicative as possible so we can set the student up for the best situation possible. We completely understand that some concerns may arise with the implementation of this accommodation. So if there's a student that feels that they have been unfairly penalized as a result of absences due to a disability-related accommodation or a disability-related condition, they should contact OAS immediately to see how that situation can be remedied or clarified. And then if there is also faculty who feel that the student's number of absences is jeopardizing the academic integrity of their course, again, please reach out to OAS. In some cases, an incomplete grade or withdrawal may be the most appropriate course of action for a student. This is especially true in cases where a student may not be able to complete the course successfully or with a passing grade otherwise. Thank you for your time and for all that you do for students, especially for your attention to this matter. If you have any questions or concerns, please contact us or the Office of Accessibility Services at our phone number 815-740-3204 or our email oas@stfrancis.edu. Thanks again.